Good morning, Ashim. I'll go
Hi.
first, if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
sure. Of course.
So the first one is, I have looked your approach, state, explain, apply,
Right.
but I'm trying to develop that skill to get 1 marks to be in 2 marks kind of thing.
Yeah.
But still, like, I'm getting stuck with that. So how do I, what else can I do to make that? Because no point me to write it and not getting marks for it. I want to write something that I'll get marks for it. And sometimes when I'm trying to write something, I understand what I need to write, but I'm not explaining. I'm not good in explaining.
Right. Okay. Okay. Great question, and a very, very common challenge that students face. So some of you are aware of my recommended approach to making a point in the SBL exam. The recommended approach is state your point, explain your point, and the third part is apply your point. So, for example, you might want to make a point about the fact that the competitive environment in your organization's situation, context, is changing. Why? Well, because there's a new competitor coming in to the market, right? So let's suppose that's the context. So you want to make a point that it's going to be more competitive, okay? So what would you say? Well, let's start with the state. The state means that you would say, look, the environment is getting more competitive. We are expecting a new competitor, or a new competitor has just entered the market. That's stating the point you want to make. You want to talk about competition. The next part is explain your point. So the explain would say something like, look, this is a new organization. They're much larger than us. They have a bigger marketing budget than us. They have access to low-cost resources from different markets. And therefore, there is a risk that they will be able to undermine us on price, for example, or provide a better quality of product than we can at that price, at the same price, right? The result of that will be a risk to our profit share and our profitability and our market share. Okay, so that's the explanation. So the state is new competitor. The explain is what that means to us. And then the application part is where you say, now look, my recommendation is that we now develop a competitive response, a competitive strategy, or embed a competitive response into our strategy. In our particular context, I would recommend the use of, I don't know, a focus strategy where we identify a niche target market for our product, invest in improving the quality of service or characteristics of our product, and therefore meet the needs of that niche better than our competitor can. When we do that, we are able to charge a premium price, right? So the apply part is really answering the question. Imagine you're presenting this to the board of directors, right? And you say to them, look, there's a new competitor, right? State. This means that there's a risk to our profitability. Explanation. Okay. Now the chances are these guys already know that, right? That's why they've employed you, right? They already know that there is a risk here. When you tell them what your recommendation is, in other words, the apply, that is where you're adding value to them, right? They'll say, okay, all right, listen, we know about the competitor, we know what that means, but what do we do about it? Or to put it differently, we know about the competitor, we know what it means, but so what, right? So what? Okay. And that's where you have the opportunity to make your recommendation or your conclusion or your analysis when you answer the so what question. And that you can link to the application part of the point that you are making, right? So that's state, explain, apply. Now, the question was, well, how do we earn our marks? Well, we earn our marks by doing what I've just described. You would earn 1 mark for the state and explain part. All right, 1 mark for the state and explain part. And the 2nd mark for the application. Right? The 2nd mark is for answering the so what question. Now, it's not something that we are accustomed to doing. All or most of our exams up until now have really been a test of our knowledge, right? Tell me about what's happening in our environment. Say, oh, there's a competitor, and that means there's a risk to our profitability. And the marker will say, great, this student has identified the environmental threat. Here are the marks. With SBL, the requirement takes you one step further. It says, tell the board of directors what they get to do about the situation you have just described. What should they do? Because with SBL, you will usually be put in a position where you are an advisor to the board or an advisor to the strategic management of the organization. All right, and the reason you are there is to give them guidance. Okay, so that is how you earn your 2 marks. You earn your 2nd mark by giving the guidance, by giving the application part of the point that you make. Are there any questions on what I have just said? Please speak now. Yeah.
No, Ashim, thank you. It makes sense for me what you just said. Back of that, I do have another question, if you may.
If it's connected, because I do have another question waiting, but
no, I can ask. The only thing I was about to ask is, does it make a difference? Do you know, sometimes like when you're writing the application point or application side of it, and if you're using like such words like competitive and those kind of things, highlight your understanding more, and it's easy to get the marks because you're using those words.
Right. Don't make your answers, super kind of what's the word? Super full of jargon. All right. Keep your answers simple. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Keep your answers simple. Now, competitive, I wouldn't really class that as jargon. I think most people understand what that means, right? But I wouldn't start using words like, Porter's generic strategies, right? Or a cost focus strategy for competitive advantage. I wouldn't start describing it like that. Okay, so keep your words simple. Say greater competition. We need to identify our customers' needs better and satisfy them better than our competitors, and that'll allow us to charge a premium price, and that will be that will recover our competitive advantage. That is simple language. Use that. You don't get extra marks for using fancy words like generic strategies, because the board of directors doesn't care what they're called. The board of directors wants to know, in practical terms, what do we do?